Among the population that we're discussing, because they are low-level offenders, is it unlikely after all of this churning of booking costs and prosecutorial costs and other ancillary law enforcement costs for what LEAD would now determine are not law enforcement issues, is it unlikely they would have spent time in county jail?
Oh, it's very likely that they would have.
They would have, okay.
Right. Hand-to-hand sales are based on previous experience in the criminal justice system, minimum of 3 months.
Right. And I would imagine with some repeat offenses, we're talking about people not only going to county jail, but also going to state prison.
Up to 60 months to 120 months, and Natalie can address that.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Walton Anderson. Oh, sorry.
Hi.
Somebody in the court.
I wanted to say, you quoted Sir Robert Peel, twice Prime Minister and founder of the modern Conservative Party, which is still a dominant party in Great Britain and is conservative. And I would hope that we could find a bipartisan approach on this issue in California. I'd love if we could start something in Lonnie and Mines County and Alameda County and start in a small area and see how we can make this work in California. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity today to hear us present about our
Need to
program.
pull the mic a little closer. Yeah.
Yeah. My name is Natalie Walton Anderson. I work for the King County Prosecutor's Office. I've worked for the office since 1997, 10 years as a prosecutor, and before that for 9 years in various positions, including our Victim Assistance Unit receptionist. I currently am in the lead liaison. I also cover the drug court calendar, and I'm in charge of the Drug Offender Sentencing Alternative Program, which is a review calendar as well. So when I initially took this position, I was trying to figure out if this was a diversion program, what the prosecutor's role was going to be if we were diverting cases. I think in a perfect lead world, someone would be referred for an arrest diversion. They would complete their intake, and they would have had no further involvement either pre or post their lead arrest diversion. They would engage with their case manager, and they would further whatever treatment needs those would be. But unfortunately, that is not the case. The majority of people that are referred to the LEAD program have criminal cases that predate LEAD, and unfortunately, due to relapse, loss of housing, and other things, they end up with new arrests and new charges because it is not. It's a harm reduction model. It is not a fix-it for everything. So in terms of how does LEAD work operationally from a prosecutor standpoint and law enforcement standpoint, the police initially, the program was to do arrest diversions. So they would come into contact with somebody who they thought would be appropriate for LEAD. They would fill out their paperwork as usual, but instead of taking them to the King County Jail to book them, they would do the handoff to the case manager who would assess their immediate needs and then get all of their contact information as to, where can I find you again? We're dealing with a population of people who are low-level drug offenders engaged in prostitution, but they do not have stable residences. Some of them don't have IDs, and it's difficult to actually locate them later. So once that happens, law enforcement sends us their case workup or their police report, because in that way it's business as usual. But the police have agreed to give up that one arrest, and our office has agreed to give up that one charge. And so the first role that I have for our office is to really monitor and hold true to our agreements and our procedures and protocols that if they do not complete the intake within that 30 days, we will review that case for filing. Luckily, for our LEAD program, we've had approximately 90% of the people complete their intake, so that has not been an issue at all. We have had approximately 10% who have not completed their intake, and we have gone ahead and reviewed those for filing. But I think what's different in terms of the prosecutor's role in this program, in terms of mainstream, is we don't review those cases just with a knee-jerk reaction and just say, well, just go ahead and send it for filing. We have the opportunity with all this information from law enforcement and the case managers to do this communication and this collaborative effort. So if someone has not completed their intake, my first job would be to contact the case manager and law enforcement and find out, is there a reason why this person did not complete the intake? Is there a reason to extend it? Instead of the prosecutor still has the discretion, but instead of making that decision in a vacuum, we do have the resources to kind of address that. The case manager may say, you know what, I'm having a real difficult time locating this person. They are homeless. I think they may have been hospitalized. I would like more time. Law enforcement may say, I've seen them every day on the corner of 3rd and Pike. There's no reason why they couldn't have engaged. So the prosecutor's office is trying to make those decisions now in terms of having more information, which I think is really helpful in terms of this program. So that's the first, I think, job and duty of the prosecutor in terms of this program. The second thing is that this population of people, they are so heavily addicted, have mental health issues, that the criminal justice system is difficult to navigate. They may have warrants outstanding in different counties. They may have old cases that they haven't resolved. And I think it's very difficult for them to do that without help. Typically, if somebody's had a warrant outstanding for so long, their defense attorney's withdrawn. They have no way to really have any contact to do that unless they are picked up on that warrant. So the second job is really to, once somebody has been completed their intake and they are officially in lead, our goal is to get a sense of all their criminal history, anything that's pre-lead, and send that summary to their case manager, and also get in them contact with the defense attorney so that they have an opportunity to start addressing some of those old issues that could present barriers to furthering their treatment goals. In King County, a lot of our housing options, number one, it's difficult for somebody with a felony record to get housing. It's almost impossible if they have warrants outstanding. So for the prosecutor's office to be a partnership in lead, our goal is to try and to remove those barriers, keeping in mind public safety, keeping in mind all of that, to allow somebody to further their treatment goals. I think it's really difficult for somebody who is trying to engage in treatment to have new cases pop up or old cases that they haven't resolved and then think, where do I go from here? What do I do? How can I get this resolved? And I think in mainstream, as a prosecutor in mainstream, I would think, well, why can't this person do this or why can't this person do that? And it's nice to have the information from the case manager and have somebody else verifying it besides the public defender so that we can know really that this is truly what's going on. So even though law enforcement drives this program, the prosecutor does have the responsibility to uphold the agreement. The other thing that's really important is tracking all of these individuals. We have 330 people in the LEAD program approximately, and I would say probably 85 to 90% have had some sort of contact in the criminal justice system. So our office is lucky enough to have a program where I can subscribe to all 330 of those people if they've ever been booked in the King County Jail or ever have had a criminal case with us. So we get notifications daily. You can subscribe to anything that you want, if any booking, any hearing, any new referral that comes in. And that's really an important tool to manage those people and any new history that come up because unfortunately, we sometimes have filing delays. So somebody could have been arrested on a charge 6 months before their lead referral, and then once they've actually been referred and engaged in treatment, that case gets filed. And then they now have to deal with this case that potentially could amount to jail time or prison time. And so the goal would be to manage those and be notified of those so that we can communicate with the case manager and the defense attorney to allow them their opportunity to continue to engage and improve their situation. So in terms of monitoring those cases, there also comes the point where there's cases that need to be resolved in some way. And just because somebody is in the LEAD program, we're looking at low-level drug offenders and prostitution cases, but they may end up back in jail even though they've been referred to the LEAD program. And I think one of the tools that's been really successful is that we've been able to come up with resolutions to cases, but also even before that, since there is a dedicated prosecutor assigned, we kind of have the model of lateral prosecution, meaning that I'm following this case from the inception all the way down to the resolution and even post-sentencing hearings. So we may have somebody who's in the King County Jail who was referred to LEAD 6 months ago. They've made some progress, but then relapsed and have become rearrested. And that case manager may come to me and the defense attorney and say, you know, this person just has a CD intake appointment for an inpatient bed in 2 weeks, and I know they're in custody. They really just need to make that chemical dependency intake appointment. And I'm finding myself making motions for temporary release on behalf of the defendant, and I have to check myself and be like, when did I become a public defender? At the same time, and Lisa Dugard always says, you're doing justice, don't think it in terms of that. But I have to think of it in terms of, and this is all with the communication and the endorsement of the defense attorney. And there is some liability, there is some risk here, but again, we're dealing with a low-level population, low-level drug user population. These are the same people that I would be releasing and striking from the jail calendar when I got it first thing in the morning and I see I have 200 people on the list and we can only hear from 60 that day. So I have to strike a certain number of people because I have to deal with the more dangerous, violent offenders. And so in terms of taking that liability and risk, yes, I'm willing to make that motion because I have information from the case managers that yes, there is a verified appointment. I have documentation of that. Yes, that person's going to be escorted. And two, the whole goal is that even after their case resolves, why do we want to present a barrier to them getting housing or treatment? Because that's just going to send them right back to our jail. So the communication factor in terms of my office with the lead case manager and defense attorney is really key. I think it's been mentioned we have these operational work groups where we staff between 20 to 40 cases the first two Wednesdays a month. And those are really key to have law enforcement talking and the case managers talking. In terms of resolving cases or new filings and making those decisions, the prosecutor's office has not given up any discretion. I know people are always like, there's still no hammer. I mean, we still always have that hammer if we choose to use it. I think in terms of this, though, we're making customized, informed decisions based on the individual's current situation, where they've come from in terms of where they were when they were first referred to leave and where they referred to lead and where they are now. And it's definitely a harm reduction model. I think as a prosecutor, you want to be like, well, I want you to get a chemical dependency intake, and I want you to be an inpatient, and I want you to do this. And the case managers sometimes have to say, this person hasn't had an ID in 20 years. So we need to kind of think about what are some realistic goals in terms of where we can see the progress. But ultimately, there will be cases that we need to resolve, and the prosecutor takes an active role in thinking, if this person has made some sort of measurable improvement, why are we going to undo all the progress that we've made with this low-level drug offender by sending them to prison? Is there some sort of resolution that we can reach that still makes this person accountable to the community and to the crime, but also allows them to further whatever progress they've made in attaining chemical dependency treatment, if that's what they choose, housing, mental health treatment, something that will enable them to hopefully help the community not see them as often, at least in the criminal justice system. And it's not by any means a perfect solution. It's more a better solution, or at least some measurable progress. So that's really the prosecutor's role in terms of lead. I just want to close with saying that I know the evaluations are really important, and the bean counters always want to know how much does this save, and I think that's really important too. But intuitively, I think that even though we have this great evaluation data, I just know, intuitively I just know that the cost savings are almost immeasurable. Diverting one person has so much savings in terms of hospital, fire, probation costs, court staff. I mean, it goes on and on and on to a point where I think it's almost impossible to measure really how much savings, because we don't know what that person would have incurred in terms of cost. But again, the prosecutor's office does not really relinquish any discretion here. We're just making decisions with more informed information that we had in mainstream, and never losing sight of the responsibility that we still have in terms of public safety in the community. We're just using our discretion a little differently. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That I just wanted to note that we've been joined by Senator Monning and by Assemblymember Joan Sawyer, who chairs the Budget Subcommittee on Prisons and Courts and Law Enforcement in the Assembly. I didn't know if you had any comments you wanted to make. He was also in Washington. We were all there for the Domestic Policy Council briefing on the program.
And I'll make it quick, and hopefully I'm not repetitive. I'm really glad to see this here. As I like to say, as a recovering bureaucrat from 25 years, I know how frustrating it can be to get through the system. Even though there may be a lot of programs for people who are formerly incarcerated or even low level, trying to navigate through that can be extremely difficult. And when I was, I'll make the analogy, but when I was planning deputy and developers were trying to get a permit done, sometimes it would take years and years for them to get it done. and we created what's called a case management system. So you have one person that could help navigate them through this. The fact that this is kind of a case management-based system is really encouraging because you got to look at it comprehensively, and you got to look at all the different ways you can help someone. And I think that's what's missing. A lot of times we're in these government, we put you in these silos, and if your education isn't so good, you're on drugs, you've been incarcerated for a long time. How do you navigate to a solution that can actually help you? Even those with a college education are having a hard time getting through government. And so I can imagine what it's like for someone that really needs some help. So I'm really encouraged about this, and hopefully we can have, one of the things we discuss, and maybe we don't, I can't get the question answered now, but you talked about your low-end people and that you try to work with them. But we also talked about in Washington, if one of these individuals does something really heinous, that could damage what you're doing. And I don't know if this is the appropriate panel to answer that question, but hopefully somewhere down the line, because as politicians, we react quickly if there's something that happens and all of a sudden the program's in danger, the whole program's in danger, everything. And so maybe you may have, hopefully you haven't had any problems, but maybe if you have had some problems where someone did something really horrendous, and how did it impact the program? Were you able to still push through, or did we elected officials run and hide, or what did we do?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of things I want to say about that. I mean, I don't necessarily think that somebody being involved in lead is going to encourage them to do something bad. I think if they have a violent propensity, they're going to do it regardless of the program. So far, we really have not had any circumstances of something terribly bad happening in terms of our lead participants. We did have someone who was engaged in the lead program who ended up what I would say is she completed her intake, had not been engaged in lead for approximately 2 years, and then ended up assaulting a tourist in our Seattle area. I guess the track record would be that she wasn't engaged in our services. She wasn't engaged in the lead program. So this is somebody who completed the intake. We gave up that one drug arrest, but I'm not necessarily convinced that one drug arrest would have prevented her from doing what she did before. What I think is more dangerous is not engaging people. We do have, the procedures are set out and protocols are set out to obviously protect the people that are involved, the politicians that have signed on to this. And I'm a line prosecutor. I'm not. I mean, my desk is at work, and that's where I'm out of my element. But anyway, I just think people will, in terms of that, the protocols are set so that we reduce liability, and that's why we've have a strict criteria in terms of the crimes that we exclude. But for the most part, these are low-level drug offenders, and I made the example earlier that these are also the people that we would cut from the jail calendar. So we already have said that these are people who are of low risk or liability, but that doesn't mean that something still terrible could not happen. But I think the bigger danger is not engaging these people. The other form of the way that we can have people referred to lead is social contacts. The police had said, and I think Chris had mentioned it earlier, they didn't want to have to wait to arrest somebody. I know who needs treatment. I see them every day, so why can't I engage them? And the social contacts, technically there are no criminal history disqualifiers because the police aren't giving up anything and the prosecutor's office isn't giving up anything. So if something bad happens to somebody who the police tried to engage in terms of introducing them to treatment or getting them set up for a case manager, I'm not sure what the liability would be. The police are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They are trying to address someone who they think who is not at this point under suspicion of a crime. They just know them to be a drug user and know them to be engaged in this activity. And so what the police are trying to do is engage this person like, hey, there's a better way. There's another avenue that you might have. So I'm not sure what the liability risks would be in terms of that scenario.
Okay.
I was just talking more political than anything else.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yes.
Just to address that question, from the very beginning, when we started these discussions in 2008, 2009, that was one of the biggest concerns from the mayor who's elected, the county executive, the county council, city council, the prosecutors, both the city and the county are all elected. And they said, we don't want a Willie Horton. We don't want a poster of someone And so that's why we were so careful, one, to closely define what the disqualifications were. And for any arrest, if you let the arrest go, they could not have been involved in violent predatory behavior. And even if they didn't have a conviction, at the operational work group, an officer from 15 years ago could remember an arrest from 15 years ago that he never got a conviction, but everyone knew he did it. So that would be not allowed. So it was very carefully crafted. And second, there was a mutual handshake among all the electeds. If the police chief gets criticized for letting this person go, or the prosecutor, then all the other electeds will come and say, this is what the planning was. It was not an individual making a decision. It was a collective decision. So it did give cover. And as Natalie said, so far after 5 years, it hasn't happened because these are low-level, nonviolent drug users and sellers.
Thank you. On to the case management part, Ms. Gale.
Thank you so much for having us here. And I just want to say thanks for your vision in taking a big risk and considering this, and your leadership to really bring it forward. I really appreciate it. So my name's Chloe Gale. I'm the co-director of the REACH program at Evergreen Treatment Services in Seattle. I've been the co-director for 20 years, and our program has done outreach and engagement with homeless people in the Seattle area with substance use issues for 20 years, and done intensive case management, tried to connect them with all types of social services. And I want to speak today a bit about what makes the social service component of the LEAD program unique and effective. And the first part of it is, I think, the most significant aspect of the LEAD social services that I think is surprising to people is that it is a harm reduction model. So I want to talk about that a little bit. It really seems like an anathema to a criminal justice approach, I think, for many people can seem that way. At the heart of harm reduction is real pragmatism. It's a pragmatic approach. And the purpose of harm reduction is to acknowledge that people are going to use substances and that some of them are going to have addiction and adverse consequences as a result of their use, that is actually a normal human behavior. And since currently we don't have adequate treatment to change all of that, in the meantime, what we need to do is apply practices that are effective and pragmatically reduce the harm for the individual and for the community. And I think in LEAD, we've recognized that if we provide a harm reduction approach for individuals in the program, but we don't solve the community problems, we're not actually being effective. So we've really looked at the array of harm reduction practices and chosen the ones that we feel are the best. There's a lot of evidence-based approaches, and Seema, who's going to speak next about our evaluation, really there are a lot of great practitioners who now are showing more and more research evidence that shows that harm reduction practices are effective. Finally, I think for most of the people that we've seen come through the door, if traditional treatment was going to work with them, it would have happened probably years ago. Many of them have had many opportunities to go to traditional treatment models, traditional criminal justice approaches, and what we've seen is that they have not succeeded. And so we really have to think outside the box. So the core, probably the most critical element of our harm reduction LEAD practice is a relationship-based approach. So we really feel like people with a lot of trauma histories, a lot of substance use and addiction, they really change and grow, progress best in the context of a consistent, non-judgmental relationship. And that's what we do. Every single person gets a case manager that tracks them for as long as possible as part of our program. When we applied for this, Chris Nierup and the folks at the Defenders Association wanted a program that would do guerrilla case management, and that's really the model that we have taken. So our case management approach, we go directly to the office to the West Precinct to meet with folks when they're arrested, but we are not an office-based resource. We are a street-based resource. We do outreach on the street. We have an outreach provider who meets with officers on the street, who's constantly looking for people, constantly engaging with them, checking to see where they are today, checking to see if they've connected with their case manager. And then when we do establish that trusting relationship, we don't just send people off to appointments to go find your ID, go connect with a nurse. We actually accompany with them to every appointment that's needed. So we acknowledge that people who have had a lot of trauma histories often have a lot of mistrust and a lot of negative experiences in bureaucratic systems, and they are not going to readily go themselves. So we really need to go with them to help reduce their anxiety, support them, help them navigate these systems that can often be really confusing and overwhelming. And finally, because so many of these people, our folks, don't actually fit traditional treatment systems, we've had to be constantly creative in how we think about how to approach them. So thinking outside of the box in terms of what we're gonna do with each issue that comes in our door. So the second part of our case management principles are that we, every single person gets a unique individual plan that is set just for them. So, we have a multidisciplinary team within our program. We have case managers. We have an outreach worker, as I mentioned. We have 2 nurses who work with our program. One is a street outreach nurse, actually, and goes and is a wound care specialist, can actually bring nursing care to someone on the street, which really is a tremendous opportunity to connect with someone who doesn't want to talk about their addiction or their use, but they do actually feel pain right now, and having someone who can lay hands on them, take care of them, provide comfort in the moment is a tremendous opportunity to connect and engage people into services. And then we use every single possible treatment service option that we can think of. We're really more of a broker to connect people to what they really need. In order to make these plans work, the third thing we've had to really have that's been unique about our model is a flexible resources and funding. So in the Seattle LEAD program, 85% of the referrals that we've gotten have been homeless. They've also had significant mental health conditions. Over 70% have had co-occurring mental health disorders. They've had really severe medical conditions. So each person, we've had to think about which plan would work best for them. And I think that the resources that we felt have been most critical have been housing. As you may be aware, that Seattle is in a terrible housing crisis, not unlike many large cities in California. That has been, we've had to really think outside the box again to try to figure out solutions that will fit for our folks and try to move them off of the street and into more stable situations. A second have been mental health services that really can work with people whether they're ready to stop using or not, and really have a lot of expertise around trauma, because that's what we see people presenting with, is a lot of trauma histories. A third, and this was a surprise for us when we started, was, and Natalie has spoken to it a little bit, is the huge significance of legal entanglements that people have, both prior criminal convictions, some ongoing criminal convictions, and then even civil convictions. We have people who are suddenly caught up in, we had one person who was about to be extradited to Chicago because of back child support payment, and really he was in no condition to ever, to be able to provide child support payments without some kind of service, treatment, recovery plan. But having that extradition really prevented him from engaging in the services that he needed. And finally, employment is really significant and important for our groups to really get them on the right path and move forward. I'm just going to speak a little bit to the outcomes that we've seen, because Seema's going to talk a little bit more about the evaluation in terms of recidivism and cost savings. But other significant outcomes have been that over 95% of the folks that we've worked with have found a better living situation. So in Seattle, we do not have housing available for everyone who's homeless, and it can be a years-long wait list, but we have found shelters, motel stays, interim housing, recovery housing supports, things that fit. Again, each person gets their individualized care model. We have succeeded in getting 40% of our folks have achieved permanent housing, which has been a big change for those folks on the street that they probably would have not have accessed themselves. And over 45% have accessed some kind of a recovery-based, abstinence-based treatment model. And that's pretty significant, given that they come in to our program really at a point of generally active use and often years and years of history of addiction and homelessness. So the fact that over time we really see them accessing treatment when they're ready has made a big difference.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, Senator Mitchell.
The 40% that are in permanent housing, is it permanent supportive housing? Okay.
It is both. Yes,
Interesting.
it's permanent supportive housing. So each person gets an assessment for what their needs are, and the people who qualify and really need that kind of ongoing support will get permanent supporting housing, which comes with rental assistance and support services.
Right.
We also, because we have such a housing crisis in Seattle, we have relied a lot on scattered site housing. So we will go to a landlord in the community, and then we will bring the services to support that person out in a private apartment, because that we know that person probably can't maintain themselves, but we'll get something like a Section 8 voucher that will help pay their rent, and then we'll provide the services so that they can stay housed. And then some also have then just gone on to become independently housed. We've had some people who've gotten employed, had regular incomes, and then they have gotten independent housing. So it's a range.
Is there a percentage of your Section 8 vouchers that are kind of reserved for your use, or, because I think before it was mentioned that you don't kind of skip, you don't bump up to the top in terms of your existing housing structure. So do you get any love on the Section 8 voucher process? How do you manage that?